Tales from the Land of Jaw, The Adventures of Gwyn Dee, The Inquisition. Gwyn Dee came to a fork in the road. It looked uncannily familiar. Gwyn Dee read the dilapidated sign pointing down the hill to the village. It took a moment to realize where this was. Gwyn Dee had traveled many months on the wide, wide road in search of the borders of the Land of Jaw, only to discover that the wide, wide road led in a big circle back to the beginning point of the long journey. Welcome to Kaminkingville. Gwyn Dee flopped down in the middle of the road in despair and sat for hours, or maybe it was days, perhaps it was weeks. The sun did not rise or set, it stood still, so it was impossible to tell how long a time had passed, sitting there in the middle of the road. An occasional merchant or passing child walked in a wide arc around the despairing traveler and stared uncomfortably. Then, after some long, long time in the wide, wide road, chanting could be heard coming up the hill from Kaminkingville. Shambhala, Shambhala. And the repetitious Shambalas came closer and closer, and Gwyn Dee knew what was coming, but did not have the strength left to flee. 13 robed inquisitors processed up the hill. They formed a circle and surrounded Gwyn Dee. The chief inquisitor in a bishop's robe carried a large hatchet. The hatcheteer took his hatchet and one by one pulled back the hoods of the 12 monks and chopped off their heads. He handed the heads of the monks back to them, and they stood calmly in the circle, spurting blood from their open necks and holding their own heads in their hands. Eerily they chanted with their disembodied heads, Shambhala, Shambhala. Suddenly the chanting stopped. The chief inquisitor, hatcheteer, called out formally and coldly, "We are here to account for your evil ways, Gwyn Dee." All 12 beheaded monks began shouting. Their disembodied heads screamed high-pitched accusations. The blood spewed like small fountains from their overexcited, pulsing arteries. From under the arm of a rather large, burly monk, his head cried, "Heresy! Heresy!" A petite blonde with a lion's mane of hair held her head in both hands and leaned forward, screaming, "You are a friend of sinners! Bewitched and filled with demons, I seen you cavorting with the devil in my dreams." The 12 headless monks screamed accusations, danced in place in little hissy fits, and created a deep circle of blood around Gwyn Dee. Their heads screamed and their bodies bled themselves out until they collapsed on the ground. The chief inquisitor smiled with deep satisfaction. "You are not welcome back until you have fully repented, heretic Gwyn Dee." The hatcheteer then took each head, and one by one he pulled the top of the skull cap over as though it was hinged, and set the open head upon the ground. Hiking his bishop's robe up above his waist, he squatted and groaned and filled each head with a steaming, reeking pile. He closed the skull caps and placed the heads back on the body. Shambhala, Shambhala. The hatcheteer marched back down to Kaminkingville as his chant faded slowly away. One by one, the bodies revived and followed the hatcheteer back to the village, chanting, leaving Gwyn Dee alone in a circle of blood. "I think you've got my body, Shambhala. I thought it felt pretty nice, Shambhala. Hey, don't be touching it like that, Shambhala, Shambhala."